The first time this Parliament, since the general election, at a time of, global instability, economic pressure, we now have big controversy about benefit cuts coming up, and there's going to be a by-election.
Yeah, so the Labour MP, well, he'd been suspended from the Labour Party, but who was convicted for assault because he took the rather unusual approach with his constituent of repeatedly punching him in the street. He was sent to prison for 10 weeks.
This is Mike Amesbury.
Mike Amesbury, reduced to a suspended sentence. He's done the honourable thing, in my view. He's fallen on his sword and says he will stand down from Parliament, which will trigger a by-election in Runcorn. Why it's interesting, Reform came second last time.
Some distance away.
Yes.
Runcorn and Helsby, excuse me, in Cheshire, some distance away, but the government's not as popular as it was at the general election.
That's an understatement.
Reform was on the rise, or it wasn't doing as well in council by-elections as it projected, as it pretended. But, of course, you now got this big split at the top of Reform.
And
precipitated by Andrew Pearce.
Yeah.
Now, in the Mail last week, Andrew, you did an interview with Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe is was one of Reform's 5 members of Parliament.
Yeah. In
which he didn't speak that kindly about the leader of Reform, Nigel Farage. Take us back to that interview and what he said.
So I got in touch with him because he's an interesting figure, serious businessman, employs over 350 people, worth about £30 million, had a really big career outside of Parliament, and he's 67. And I'd heard there were some difficulties in his relationship with Nigel Farage. I said, would you talk to the Mail? 2 hours I spoke to him. The last 10 minutes I talked about, what do you think of Nigel Farage? Has he got what it takes to be Prime Minister? Some very interesting replies. He has messianic qualities.
Thinks of himself as the Messiah.
Exactly. And I'm not sure whether that will translate into sage, wise leadership. Would he make a good Prime Minister? I'm not sure. He's got to surround himself with a good team. At the moment, he hasn't got a good team. And if he doesn't get a good team, if he doesn't make Reform... Basically saying if Reform is still a one-man band at the next election, he won't be around.
And you detonated an earthquake, didn't you?
Yeah. Now, I'd have thought Nigel Farage...
An earthquake.
Detonate an explosion, surely, or a bomb. Do you detonate an earthquake?
Of course you can. If you put the
firearm
in the right place and press it, then the earth quakes.
He's brought the Civil War into the open.
Have you been eating a lot of fish?
Anyway, let's move on from the fish story.
Yes. So I thought Nigel Farage's reaction would be to say, oh, look, politics, you have differences of opinion.
Free speech.
Free speech, of course.
We're a party which can...
All of that.
You discuss all of these issues.
We are the new kids on the block. We do things differently to the Tories and Labour. Instead, Nigel gave a big interview where he said, well, I think perhaps he wants my job. I think perhaps he wants to be Prime Minister. So a stroke saying it was all personal. But then the next day, a statement is released by Reform, jaw-dropping. First of all, it reveals that the chairman of Reform, Zia Youssef, has shopped this bloke, Rupert Lowe, to the police for allegedly threatening him with violence all the way back in December.
Is it a good use of police time to be investigating these...
Nonsense, a bit of blimmin' argy-bargy, and also revealing they'd brought in a KC, an eminent lawyer, to investigate allegations they'd been bullying in Rupert Lowe's office. Now, all this came out coincidentally the day after my interview appeared, cue meltdown in Reform. And he's now been suspended from the party.
So he's still the MP for Great Yarmouth, but he's no longer a Reform MP.
Yeah.
Kevin, meanwhile, Labour call a by-election, presumably hoping to capitalise on the fact that their main contender, Reform, are currently in meltdown.
Yeah, I would have thought the timing isn't a coincidence. Just as it wasn't in Reform. Reform's got all these problems on Rupert Lowe, but they're trying to cover them up and keep them internal. Then he has a go at Nigel Farage, so they then make them public and go off to the police. I don't think that's a coincidence. And I don't think Labour now getting Mike Amesbury, who's suspended from Labour, so he's an independent MP. All of a sudden he says, right, I'm going to resign and have the by-election now. But it'll be a really interesting by-election. It'll be hard fought. It'll be hard fought between Labour and Reform.
One of the issues, I wonder, Andrew, was that Elon Musk had said that he didn't think Nigel Farage was the right person to be leading Reform, and he said that he liked the cut of Rupert Lowe's jib. This is a couple of months ago. Yeah. Do you think that wound Nigel Farage
I think it did, without a doubt, because we thought Elon Musk may be giving the Reform up to £100 million. I think that would have been a mistake, in my own view, but that was what he was saying, the world's richest man. And he did put a tweet out saying he didn't think Nigel was up to it. And there is an issue with Nigel. Some people say tall poppy syndrome. He's not very good at having rivals around him. And also, look...
Tall poppy was the phrase used by Rupert Lowe yesterday. Although the front of the Financial Times, it's not often that you quote the Financial Times on British politics in quite this way. Musk looking at backing rival to reform as Farage feud sinks party in civil war. The FT are getting kind of hints from Elon Musk that he may be going to give money to a new party, maybe a Rupert Lowe party, an alternative to Reform.
Well, I spoke yesterday to Ben Habib. He used to be the deputy leader of Reform. He quit Reform in November because he said he couldn't... No, Nigel Farage isn't a team player. He's an egotist. He didn't call him a messiah. But I did point out in the Mail yesterday, you know what happened to the last messiah? Well...
OK.
Crucified, wasn't he? I mean, that's what people... I mean, Rupert Lowe used... Well, I mean, it's...
Yeah, but
I'm not the religious one, but he came back to life and never really died. I mean,
subsequent
Is he going to come back? Yeah.
He's still leading a worldwide religion 2,000 years on, if he ever existed.
But it was a very interesting choice of words by Rupert. And he used the word Messiah 4 times.
But you know, it's classic hard right politics. Freedom of speech is their own speech. It's not anybody else's speech. And they always fall out because the opposition are Labour, Conservatives, Lib Dems, but the enemy is each other.
OK, but, Kevin, we might be discussing the fact that Reform, you know, with only 5 MPs already lost one, kind of having a meltdown. People still back Reform. Voters still back Reform.
They'll be disappointed.
But will it matter? Do they, you know, Nigel Farage is a really popular politician.
Yeah, but of course...
They might not care who Rupert Lowe is.
Yeah, to break out and actually get into a position where you're winning lots of seats, he realises he's got to build a wider coalition of voters. And if you look at the detailed analysis of who backs Reform, Hope Not Hate did this with a mega poll, the anti-fascist group. It's against... what Farage stands for. Nevertheless, they did it. And you find about 1/5 of Reform voters hate the racism and the bigotry, but they think it's just time to give somebody else a go. Now, if you look like you're a big mob and you're squabbling and you look really nasty and vile and you're all just saying each other is terrible, then you're going to lose those people. So it's like, as Farage tries to get a bigger alliance, he's going to make some internal ideological enemies
by the way,
who want to be rather
would
narrow.
Reject the idea of racism.
Yes, they would.
They would repudiate that completely.
They would, Andrew, but if you go to the heart of this row, which has happened between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage, it might be about ego and who should be the leader.
Yeah.
But it's also about the fact that Rupert Lowe has been very positive in praising about Tommy Robinson.
Yeah.
Elon Musk has been praising Tommy Robinson, who Nigel Farage clearly thinks, certainly Richard Tice thinks, that being in league with Tommy Robinson is a disaster for the Reform Party electorally because he is, you know, he's a convicted criminal and seen as having very, very unsavoury views on race and on those kind of issues. And so, I mean, it does go to Kevin's point, which is, does Reform want to be a fringe far-right group, or is it trying to be a mainstream party?
Lowe would say his main point is about migration. He's got a very simple view about migration. Illegal migrants, all of them should be deported. And he actually said, initially, when they crossed the Channel, he would ship them straight off to an island off of the Scottish coast, if necessary. And he actually used the quote, let the midges do their work.
He's probably the nastiest of the 5.
I don't think
but it's
nasty.
interesting, of the 5...
I think he's very impressive.
Of the 5
but you aren't
MPs...
supporting that strategy for dealing with migration?
Of course I'm
not. It's a
but
nasty, vile thing to say.
Look, his point is, these migrants cross the Channel. We've seen this one about this guy who's a Hamas supporter, wants death to all Jews, said that he's had his social media closed down. We don't even know if he's in a hotel. He crossed it on Friday. Yes, we don't know if he's in a hotel. We don't know
if he's arrested, I think he'll be in
but we don't know where he was
custody.
today. And the human rights... And because of these ridiculous human rights laws in this country, he probably won't be sent back to Gaza because it's a war zone.
But you aren't saying put children onto a Scottish island with no food or water and let the midges eat.
No, I'm not
I
saying
don't think that. Sorry, I don't think Rupert Lowe said put them on an island and don't give them food
and he did
water.
say he would feed them.
He just said
He did say let the midges do...
Yeah, but midges, Kevin, sorry, I'm not endorsing what he said.
It was
but that's a
throwaway remark.
That's a flippant
It was a
remark.
flippant
Isn't it? Let the midges do
I
their
don't
work.
think you meant put them in hotels.
No, it's a sign. You want them to be incredibly harsh and nastily.
He would put them in a tented community and they would be given food, and then they would get, as soon as their applications, their things were processed, they'd be sent straight back.
But it's interesting, if you look at the 5...
Rather than putting them in hotels at huge expense of the public purse.
If you look at the 5 Reform MPs, and they say they want to represent the British working class, which is dispossessed, 2 of them are city slickers, one's a property developer, and Rupert Lowe is a very, very wealthy businessman. There's only one, Lee Anderson, who was a Labour member, then went to the Tories and defected Reform, who was a coal miner back in the day. So Rupert Lowe is just in the tradition of incredibly wealthy Britons who say, come on, follow me, working class, I'll make you better. No, he won't.
He's a very successful businessman who's created hundreds and hundreds of jobs.
The thing is, we've just spent 15 minutes talking about reform, which will come as no disappointment to them whatsoever in the run-up to a by-election.
I think all publicity isn't good publicity.
Divided parties don't win elections.
And that was part of Reform's appeal. They're not like the old parties, Labour and the Tories always falling out in public. The Tories were a complete war, weren't they, in the last few years of Rishi's premiership. And we're going to see, I think, as this Labour government continues to lurch from one mess to another, the division and splits in the Labour ranks.
If you've opened up a divide in the Reform Party, do you think that they can solve this? How do they sort this out now?
Well, they'll hope it just blows away. But I think Nigel has to, in my view, Nigel has to become more of a team player.
Right,
and bring Rupert Lowe back into the Reform?
Well, I would.
Look, meanwhile, we have an emerging split in the Labour Party over welfare cuts. And we have a huge number of responses this morning, Kevin, from people on benefits saying, what are you going to do? Because we thought something was going to happen this week on benefit cuts. We don't yet know what or who or when. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says it's a completely unworkable, indefensible system currently. And you've got people on personal independence payments who rely on that money, who are thinking, hang on a moment, are you about to draw away my lifeline? I mean, that's a never mind politically, never mind internal politics. If you rely on these disability benefits... That's right.
You're in desperate straits. I think it ranges from... I'm sure people watching who receive them will be able to correct me, but I think it ranges from about $1,500 a year to nearly $10,000 a year, depending on your level of disability.
Yeah.
And if you're... Of course you're going to be worried and fretting and you're, not to say terrified about it, which is why the government, if it's going to do it, has to get it as quickly as possible. But it has to remember, and we had this discussion yesterday, if people are disabled and incapable of working, to punish those people, to hurt those people, would be unconscionable. It would be completely and utterly wrong.
But the problem at the moment is nobody knows what the government's proposing.
I know, and that is going to spread to the uncertainty and the fear.
Emma on email, I can't sleep because of the prospect of benefit cuts. The cuts genuinely scare me. Jessica on email, if they cut my benefits, I won't be able to afford my assistance dog. Right now, I'm feeling very depressed. I'm scared. I just want to say how scared I am of losing my PIP. So there's a lot of fear.
Yeah, now, look, the benefit system isn't incredibly generous as it's painted out to be. There's not a huge amount of fraud as sometimes as...
But the bill is soaring, Kevin. The bill is soaring.
So you've got to tackle why people who could work and are not working, you've got to get them fit for work and wanting work. That's one thing. But you do not then punish people who are disabled and cannot work, or sick and cannot work.
Why are there nearly 1 million people aged between 18 and 25 who are not in work, not in education, not in training? That is a scandal. And I just don't buy that all those young people have got some problem that prevents them going into the workplace.
And we absolutely have to support people who can and want to work.
Yeah.
But the trouble is there's such a cloud of uncertainty at the moment, and it is gathering pace on the backbenches. Let's hear from Neil Duncan Jordan, who is the Labour MP for Poole, speaking on Newsnight last night.
Cuts to benefits don't make jobs, they only make more poverty in our society, and that's why I'm very worried about some of the things I'm reading. And I think if we're going to make poor people poorer, then there'll be a number of MPs who won't be able to sign up to that. It feels like it could be a rerun of austerity, and I'm worried about that.
Austerity.
Well, he will remember...
It's a hated word.
The Conservatives, with the Lib Dems in the first 5 years of their reign, made the system meaner, crueler, nastier, and it had no impact on getting people into work. You just punished people. You could not show... If you get a big stick and you begin to batter people with it, it's not going to get them into work. There were lots of other practical measures. There were incentives would get people into work, help would get people into work, but just being nasty doesn't get people into work.
And this goes to the heart of it, because Keir Starmer, we're reporting, saying that, you know, the system is broken and needs to be reformed, the costs are soaring. That is totally right, that we need to find better ways to get people into work, to deal with these surging costs. But then the issue becomes, as we've just been talking about, it's been reported in the papers last night at that private meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party. One MP says to Keir Starmer that, you know, I have a son, has cerebral palsy, he'll never work, and cutting his personal independent payment, how do we justify that? That is the problem, isn't it? If you want to get the benefits bill down, that's the right thing to do by getting people into work, but there's a certain group of people who can't work, and to cut their benefits, that seems very, very hard.
Well, and we heard that Labour MP, that minister yesterday, Norris, who just flatly refused to say that he should have just said, we will protect those people.
Yeah.
And they should be protected. If you can't work and you're disabled, you can't take their benefits away from them.
What's the Labour government stand for if it's not going to
But there are people who are gaming the there are people who are gaming the system, and that's got to be weeded out.
OK, so let me just give you an example of where reform might benefit on this. Ellen, on X, maybe if there weren't so many illegal immigrants being given benefits, the system would be better. Zara on X, he's targeting vulnerable people but gives Ukraine billions and billions every year.
Yeah, well, he's going to get this if he's going to target people, but, you know, I think it's right that we support Ukraine, and I also think it's right when people come here, particularly refugees and migrants, till they have their cases heard, then they will have to be supported in some way. But they don't get benefits as such. They get a very small amount of cash. It's next to nothing, actually. And I've always thought when people are waiting for their claims to be heard, it's wrong that they can't work.
Well, they're put them in a hotel at public expense. That's what they are. And they get some money as well.
Billions.
And it's costing billions. It's costing billions.
That's because your lot lost control of the system.
Well, you lot have been in power for 8 months now. And Kevin, 2,000 crossed the channel this weekend.
Going through your backlog.
Yeah. 2,000 crossed the channel this weekend. I thought Labour were going to smash the gang.
Labour sorted it last time. They'll eventually sort it again.
They're not doing very well at the moment.
They got a huge backlog last time.
Yeah.
Because you make
you can't
false
keep blaming Tories, Kevin.
You're not blaming the Labour government for the rise in people on incapacity benefit.
No, I'm not, but I'm saying...
You're not blaming Labour for the fact that we had record numbers of people in asylum hotels.
No, I'm saying that that Labour told us
they need
in
to
the
get it down
manifesto
quicker.
they were going to close the hotels. They're opening more hotels for migrants at huge public expense, and it causes all sorts of problems with social cohesion in local communities. It's a big problem, and they're not getting grip of it.
What did you make of this couple who came back from their trip to France
Right.
with their motorhome?
I'm with a couple.
And 6 hours it took them, and they said that they didn't get checked leaving after they zipped up their bike cover, got in their motorhome, first camper van trip they'd ever done in this new motorhome abroad, and came home, unzipped the bike cover, and out comes this chap. Claims he's 16 years old.
Of course he does.
They gave him some water, they gave him some fruit, they rang the police, as you would. They are then subsequently slapped with a £1,500 fine. We're going to talk to them in a few minutes' time, but they say it's going to completely put people off ringing the police.
Yeah,
because if you're the one who's going to get fined...
Why didn't the Border Force check the van?
Right.
That's their job.
Well, I think they went round the van twice and checked their gas, but not if anyone was on. But look, they didn't know. I can see you have fines to stop people willfully bringing people in.
They're not people smugglers.
No, this is quite clearly they didn't know, and they did the right thing when they found out, and they just sounded a lovely couple. Well, I heard her, I'm not saying...
Yeah.
And just wave the fine.
Well, it made me think, because they say there were plenty of traffic stops, you know, like traffic lights on the way. Were they supposed to check at every single one? At every single one, because they said there were groups of young men hanging around these traffic lights. So did the chap jump on at one of these lights? But I was thinking, if I was driving a motorhome on my own, driving back from France. I wouldn't want to keep getting out
with gangs
and
of lads.
checking someone wasn't jumping on the back of my
But you know what's
motorhome.
going on here? I mean, these fines are the border agency stopping people, haulage drivers, turning a blind eye. Somebody jumps on the back in exchange for a cash payment. And if there's not the criminal ability to actually kind of take them to trial, you put on a fine for them being negligent. But presumably, the moment they find out it's ordinary couple in the motorhome, surely they on appeal.
Common sense should just kick in, and you realise
these people are not the target of what they're trying to do.
No,
they are not traffickers.
No.
If they had 25 people in the back of their motorhome and pretended they didn't know,
good point,
that would be something. But I mean, sometimes you want to pull your hair out, and just think, look, get a grip.
But they've got no grip.
Border force, get a grip.
As the drive, according to the clandestine entrance civil penalty scheme, the driver must, as soon as practicable, before reaching immigration control, have checked no clandestine entrant was concealed in the vehicle. But as I say, there'd be plenty of solo travellers who might not want to take that risk.
And more to the point, you won't call the police when you get in case you get a fine.
If it's in the vehicle, it wasn't actually in the vehicle.
No,
was it? I mean,
that's one of the points that they're using to appeal.
I mean, look,
didn't get into the vehicle, got into the bike cover, covering the bike attached to the vehicle.
If he was sitting up front with them, I mean, yes, but